Hello and welcome to Universal Recaps. Today, I will explain a thriller, drama movie called Joke. This is going to be the greatest thriller movie ever. The story begins in Gotham City, where we meet a man named Arthur Fleck. He works as a party clown and is putting on makeup in his company's office for the next job. While looking at himself in the mirror, he pulls his face to make a happy face, but later he makes a sad face and sheds a tear at the end. After that, he goes out on the street, dancing and holding a sign for the shop that hired him for promotion. Some kids take his sign and run away with it. Arthur chases them and finds them in a small street, where they attack him and beat him badly. After getting the broken signboard to the office, Arthur visits his therapist. They talk about his journal, which he's using for both writing his thoughts and jokes because he wants to be a stand-up comedian in the future. While reading the book, therapist reads a troubling line from the journal, "I hope my death makes more sense than my life," and asks Arthur how he feels about their therapy sessions and returns his journal. Arthur mentions that he used to hurt himself when he was in the hospital but he feels better now. He asks if he can have more medication, but she tells him he's already taking 7 different kinds of medication. Arthur tells her he just wants to feel better. After the therapy session, Arthur takes the bus to his home. Inside the bus, he entertains a kid with funny faces. This upsets the kid's mother and she scolds Arthur. Soon after, Arthur starts laughing, but he explains his card that he laughs because of a neurological condition and he cannot control his laughter in any situation. After reaching his street, he picks up his medicine from the pharmacy and goes home to his apartment, where he lives with his mother, Penny. As usual, she asks Arthur again if she got any letter. Arthur denies. Later, she's worried about her letters not reaching Thomas Wayne, her former ex-employer. Arthur tries to reassure her that he is a working man and might not get time to answer the mail and helps her with dinner. After dinner, they watch the Murray Franklin comedy show together. In a daydream, Arthur imagines himself on the show, to be a part of a wealthy audience, and it makes him happy. The host notices him and invites him to stand up. Arthur introduces himself and talks about taking care of his mother in her old age, earning Franklin's respect. Franklin asks him to come down on stage, and Arthur receives great applause from the audience. Franklin says that he would love to have a child like him, and then they share a heartfelt hug. Back in the real world, Arthur smiles about this comforting fantasy dream. The next day at work, Arthur's back is badly bleeding. His co-worker, Randall, gives him a gun as a gift for his self-defense. Another co-worker, Gary, interrupts them to inform Arthur that their boss wants to see him. In the boss's office, Arthur is scolded for losing the signboard and disappearing from the streets. Arthur tries to explain he was beaten up, but his boss doesn't believe him. He threatens to take the cost of the signboard from Arthur's monthly paycheck. Arthur remains silent in the office and smiles, but later expresses his frustration by kicking a trash can outside the building. Later, in his home elevator, Arthur meets his neighbor Sophie and her daughter. The elevator malfunctions and for some time they talk briefly about the building's bad condition and share a playful gesture of shooting herself. Later they leave the elevator and Arthur in return makes the same gesture. Later that day, Arthur helps his mother, Penny, with a bath, but she's still concerned about her letters to Thomas Wayne as she believes that he would help them from getting off these bad living conditions. Arthur reassures her, believing that his stand-up comedy career will make them rich soon. Penny doubts him, thinking comedians need to be funny like Franklin. A few hours later, after putting his mother to bed, Arthur practices with his new gun while watching a movie. As a song plays on the TV, Arthur begins dancing to it while pretending to talk to a girl. In the process, he accidentally fires his gun. His mother wakes up and asks about the noise, to which he responds by claiming it's just a war movie on television. The next day, Arthur follows Sophie around the public transport town and even on the busy streets. In the evening, he attends a stand-up show to take notes, which he continues working on when he returns home. He writes his thoughts about, "The worst part of having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't." His writing is interrupted by the doorbell and is surprised to find Sophie at the door. She asks if he's been following her, and he admits to it, leading her to wonder if he intends to rob her home in the coming week. In response, he jokes about it, and Sophie finds him funny. Arthur then invites her to his stand-up show, and she accepts before leaving his place. The next day, Arthur works as a clown in a hospital, entertaining children. During his show, his gun falls to the floor. He quickly retrieves it and asks the kids to keep it a secret from everyone. However, His boss is furious when he hears about the incident and fires Arthur over the phone. Arthur tries to explain the gun to be a toy for his next performance. But later his boss proved him wrong because he received a written letter from Randall that Arthur purchased a gun from him. In frustration, Arthur hits the glass with his head and leaves the booth. Later he takes the subway back home, where he encounters 3 young men teasing a young lady. Arthur's sudden laughter makes the woman leave, and all the men start mocking him for his clown appearance. When Arthur tries to explain and retrieve his belongings, they assault him. Soon they pushed him to the ground and started kicking him. This time, Arthur defends himself by shooting 2 of the men. The third one escapes in fear when the subway stops at a station, but Arthur follows him all around and shoots him on the stairs. Realizing the darkness of his actions, Arthur rushes out of the station and runs through the streets. In a public restroom, he locked himself up in fear, but after some time he started dancing inside. After some time he returns to his apartment building, where he kisses Sophie as soon as she opens her door, and they spend the night together. The next day, Arthur retrieves his belongings from work and hears his co-workers discussing the subway shooting news committed by a clown. They offer condolences for losing his job, including Randall, which irritates Arthur. In frustration, he confesses that it was his gun used in the crime, breaking the punch clock on his way out. He also modifies the "Don't forget to smile" sign to "Don't smile" by rubbing 2 words. Back in his apartment, Arthur takes his last pills and watches TV with his mother. Thomas Wayne is on the news because the murdered men were his employees in his factory. After asking by the reporter, Wayne suggests that those who do nothing with their lives are clowns and that the killer wore a clown mask to hide his cowardice. He also tells the reporter that once he becomes mayor of the city he will send every clown behind bars as their lives are valued less. Some weeks later, Arthur sees his therapist again and tells her about his happy mood and that people have started treating him in a good way, but in return, he is interrupted by her and she tells him their funding has been cut, making it to be their last meeting. He asks about his remaining therapy sessions and medication but ends up receiving only an apology in response. Later that night, Arthur performs his stand-up routine at a bar, with Sophie in the audience. On stage, he bursts into uncontrollable laughter and struggles to deliver the jokes he reads from his journal but ends up delivering the wrong jokes. After the show, he leaves with Sophie, and in the streets, they notice newspaper headlines featuring a clown face, claiming to be a murderer, but Sophie thinks the clown to be a hero, and this makes much to Arthur's satisfaction inside his heart. As a car passes by, Arthur notices someone wearing a clown mask similar to the drawings in the newspapers. After having dinner with Sophie, he returns to his apartment, where his mother has fallen asleep in front of the open TV. He wakes her up and sends her to bed, and she mentions she's written a new letter. Arthur decides to read the letter and discovers that he's Thomas Wayne's son. This revelation angers Arthur, and Penny in fear locks herself in the bathroom, explaining from inside that she and Wayne were in love but had to keep it a secret due to legally signed property papers. The next day, Arthur reads the newspaper on the way and finds a photo of the Waynes, which he tears off and saves in his diary. Shortly afterward, he visits the Wayne building, where a young Bruce Wayne is playing baseball in the garden. Arthur tries to perform magic for Bruce, but the boy is unimpressed. Arthur asked the little boy his name and pulled his cheeks to make a smiling face. After a brief interaction, Alfred intervenes, threatening to call the police. Arthur claims to be Penny's son and demands to see Mr. Wayne, but Alfred laughs at him, telling him his mother is a liar and her mental state is not good, and dismisses Penny's claims as delusion. Arthur tries to choke him for insulting his mother but leaves after he sees a little boy watching. Back in the evening, when Arthur returns home, he notices that paramedics are taking his mother to the city hospital, and he joins her. Later, 2 cops approach Arthur, telling him about interrogating his mother before she had a stroke, and now they want to interrogate Arthur. They want to question him about the subway murders, and Arthur tries to explain that his gun was just a prop before returning to his mother's room. Inside, Sophie keeps him company for a while before leaving. After some time, Arthur watches the Murray Franklin show on TV and is hurt to see them using clips of his failed stand-up routine to make jokes on him. Later, inside his room, TV shows riots with people wearing clown masks break out in response to Wayne's comments about killing every clown and putting them behind bars. Arthur decides to join the protests. When he reaches there, he sneaks into a movie theater, by stealing an employee's uniform. He watches the movie while keeping an eye on Wayne. Then he confronts him in the bathroom about Penny and asks about the letters. Wayne denies any involvement with Penny and claims that Arthur was adopted and his mother is a liar. Arthur feels this to be a lie and this angers Arthur, causing him to laugh. Suddenly Wayne punches him before leaving to visit his house. Upon returning home, Arthur ignores a call from the police and hides inside the fridge for the night. The next day, he receives a call from Franklin's production offering him a spot on the show, which he eagerly accepts. Afterward, he takes the bus to the city hospital to request his mother's file. The clerk confirms that she was psychotic and harmed her child but refuses to give Arthur the file. So Arthur steals it and reads it in hiding, confirming that he was adopted and that Penny lied about Wayne. She also raised him with an abusive boyfriend who was later arrested. Deeply upset by this fact, Arthur enters Sophie's apartment without warning. When Sophie discovers him, she becomes frightened and asks him to leave. As Arthur reflects on their time together, we learn that it was all a product of his imagination and Sophie was never with him in the past day. The next day, while visiting Penny, he tells her his life is a tragedy, not a comedy, before suffocating her with a pillow. Later, Arthur prepares for his appearance on the show. After speaking what he's going to say, he dyes his hair green and starts applying his bright makeup. However, he's interrupted by the doorbell. He hides a pair of scissors in his pants and answers the door to find Gary and Randall, who came to visit after hearing about Penny's uncertain death. Randall expresses concern about the police questioning clowns and Arthur's possession of his gun. In response, Arthur stabs Randall with the scissors and punches him around the wall brutally. Gary panics and wants to leave and he is allowed to leave unharmed because he has always been kind to Arthur. After changing into a new suit, Arthur heads to the show. He is found by the police on the street. He starts running away, eventually entering the subway filled with people wearing clown masks heading to the protests. The police follow him and chaos ensues when Arthur starts a fight by stealing a clown mask. In the middle of the confusion, the police accidentally shot a man. So when the subway stops at a station, the crowd turns onto the officers, allowing Arthur to escape unnoticed. Later, he arrives at the studio. While waiting in the dressing room, Franklin comes by to check on Arthur and asks him for a fantastic show night. Arthur accepts the invitation and requests to be introduced as Joke. He reassures everyone that his clown makeup is not a political stunt. He enters the stage dancing and later kisses a lady on the stage. Then he tells a dark joke about death, for which he is scolded by Franklin. Frustrated, he confesses to being the subway killer, as he feels he has nothing left to lose. Then he goes on a lengthy speech about the system failing for the underprivileged people and how Murray Franklin is no different for inviting him to the show to make fun of him. In a shocking turn, Arthur shoots Murray Franklin on live television. The broadcast is immediately cut, and Arthur is arrested by the police. While being taken away in a police car, he observes the riots in the streets with people wearing clown masks and calls it beautiful. However, the car is suddenly struck by an ambulance. The protester driving the ambulance, along with others wearing masks, rescues Arthur and places him on top of the hood of the vehicle. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the Wayne family is leaving a mall when a protester follows them from behind. The protester shoots Thomas Wayne and his wife, leaving young Bruce Wayne alone with their lifeless bodies. Back to Arthur. He wakes up and finds the protesters cheering for him. Arthur stands on top of the car and dances for the crowd. He notices blood coming from his nose and uses it to create a wider smile around his mouth. Several days later, Arthur is shown inside the Arkham State Hospital. When the therapist comes to check on him, he starts laughing. When she inquires about what he finds amusing, he responds that she wouldn't understand and starts singing a song titled, "That's Life." The film ends with Arthur leaving the room and dancing in the hallway, leaving behind a trail of bloody footprints. Subscribe to Universal Recaps and turn on notifications for regular updates. Give a thumbs up if you like our content.